Welcome to Blue Collar Mystics, the under-the-hood approach to the depths of human consciousness. So many mysteries, so little time, so many big words. That's why we aim to take the mystical and make it practical, usable in your everyday life. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear your story. What happened when you started asking yourself the real questions? Like, who am I? What is this? Is it a hologram? Is this some kind of weird cosmic joke? Hey, these are the questions that we are trying to get to the bottom of as we explore the final rabbit hole together here as Blue Collar Mystics. What's up, everybody? We are live. Good evening. How are you? I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to this live stream with Abbie Johnson. We are talking about transurfing. We're on a Transurfing Safari. That's why we did the surf music intro.
Hang loose.
Yeah. Everybody's favorite California girl. What's up, everybody in the chat? Welcome to it. Yeah, we are going to be touching on tonight what I think is probably the most important and unique concept in this book. I don't know, maybe not, but probably. I don't know. What do you think?
It's one of two. Yeah, I think there's two major important concepts, and this is one of them.
This one is presented in a way that I had never heard before when I found out about the concept. It has everything to do with group energy, how group energy, and I think it has a lot to do with neural pathways too, and how we interact with the world, how obstacles happen with us when we're trying to reach and accomplish a goal. And it is, once you see this concept and you start to see it in action, it's very empowering and illuminating, especially once you can start to take your energy back a little bit.
Absolutely.
So the name of the concept that Vadim calls it is pendulums, and I got my book here. I might even kind of summarize a little bit of like his intro, because I think he just like, I remember the first time I read that chapter and I was just like, yes. I know I know exactly what you're talking about, and this is amazing. And I just couldn't stop reading, but it definitely made a huge impact on my life. How would you, Abbie, describe what a pendulum is, do you think?
A pendulum is anytime you get a group of people together who have group think, everybody thinks alike, they see things the same way. It creates an energy structure around them it's metaphysical, like you don't see it, but it's almost tangible. You can feel it. And it's where, you see it everywhere. You see it in nature. So like birds that all fly together, a school of fish, they all think with one mind and they move at the same time. Not one of them is ahead of the others. They kind of do it all in sync. But anytime, so this would be anything where you two or more gathered together, right? Kind of that concept. But it's the negative side of things. It's the way that the whole world works. Like, you don't have forward momentum without it. But they're leashes, they're energy vampires. They suck your energy, literally.
Yeah. It's so trippy too, because it's like it's not a concept that you can just point. You start to see it, but you can't like point directly to it like in a material way, like materially. But you do see it happen right in front of you, and you're like, holy shit, this is it. And it goes even further than that too, like the group thing, 100%, right? Like there's all these like arrangements of energy. It's like if you think of a river with a lot of different currents in it, and all those currents are each their own groupings, they're moving in their own direction, and we basically become part of each one of those very often, usually without even realizing that we're doing it. And that's why this is such a powerful concept, because I lived my entire life as pendulum fodder and not even knowing it. I didn't know that I was being pimped by groups, and even after reading the book, I was still being pimped.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of practice to, and I mean, if you're not paying attention, it's easy to fall back asleep because it's a, I wish I would have brought my pendulum out here, but a pendulum swinging, they're hypnotic. So yeah, that's where it goes into law of hypnotic rhythm too. So if we want to get into that,
Yeah, I mean,
but
that's a very powerful point, and well taken too. Another book you guys should read, Reality Transurfing. It's an excellent book. Highly recommend it. Another great book is
Outwitting the Devil.
Outwitting the Devil, yes, by Napoleon Hill, where he talks about the law of hypnotic rhythm. And people will talk about this in neuroscience too. I was just watching a video just a minute ago. It was really good. And this guy was talking about how our patterns are created, and it's like walking through the snow a bunch of times. It just gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. The law of hypnotic rhythm. I thought I had a pendulum in here, but I guess I don't. You got a bunch of rocks.
I had every intention to bring mine like to podcast tonight, and then it just wasn't on my mind when I was getting set up.
But yeah, that the law of hypnotic rhythm, they're really synonymous, and it was ahead of its time. But it's like you can literally see these patterns happen over and over and over again. And he talks about it in this chapter about breaking out of patterns. And I'll just read. I'll try to paraphrase so we don't get in trouble, but I'll just read a little bit about like kind of how he opens it, because he does a really good job. Like a hypnotic rhythm does sound sexy, it's very, it's very seductive. And that's why it works. It's right. It's totally subconscious. Like that's why these things are so effective. And this is how like you said a bit ago, Abbie, this is how reality works. So once you start to understand and put your finger on this, you can begin to, as he says at the beginning in this chapter 2, he says, but like what reality transurfing is about is learning to choose, right? It's not this big word manifest, but similar as an idea, but it's about learning to choose. But before you choose, you have to learn to decline. You have to learn to decline. And so that never hit me. That didn't hit me until I read it yesterday. I read this chapter twice in the past 2 days. Just like, I want to be on my game here since we're doing this. But like there's this old saying that I don't want to fuck this up because it's a beautiful quote, Apollo Suelo. Do you know the one I'm talking about, where he's talking about like whenever you make a plan, whenever you make a plan, well, you're the alchemist. Whenever you make a plan, the universe conspires for you.
Yeah. All things. Yeah. The universe. Something like that. I know exactly what you're talking about.
All right.
I have it written down somewhere.
Okay. Yeah. Because it's from that book and it's awesome. Okay. So I didn't want to butcher it and I did. So here we are. And when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it, is what he says. It's from The Alchemist. And it's beautiful. That's such a beautiful quote. And that is true. And there is a counter to that too, because anytime you want something, all the pendulums conspire against you in order to achieve it. And that is exactly how it works. You've got these energetic informational structures, these thought streams.
But what's interesting about them in the way that he describes it is it's not just like group think. It literally becomes a separate entity that is harvesting the energy. And so this harvesting of the energy, he can't even tell you if it's animate or inanimate. Like, so
No,
it could be alive. It might not be alive, but there is something that's actually taking the energy of the thought process of these people, and then it becomes something bigger, that nobody's really in control of anymore. They're just feeding it.
absolutely. Yeah, that's what's crazy about it. And he says in the chapter, he's like, we don't know if these structures are animate or not, but for the purposes of transurfing, it doesn't matter. It could easily be what is described as demons or jinn in other, spiritual books, just as much, right? The principalities and the powers of the air, as they talk about in the Bible, right?
Well, what struck me is because this is all based a lot on Carlos Castaneda's work. So the concept of flyers, that
Mm.
there's these, these entities that actually do loose and harvest your intent and your energy. So it's the whole idea of flyers in the Castaneda books too.
Or archons,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, so these are very difficult to describe, but they're collections of energy, and so yeah, so often we come together and form these, but like you said just a minute ago, they often grow much larger than what we intended. So you hear the saying, you want to build a bear, but you don't want the bear to eat you. That's 99.99% of the time. That's what happens. You create this thing and then you wind up being its little bitch, more or less. And that's in very, coarse terms. But he says that we are taught from childhood to obey the will of other people, to serve our country, family, the company we work for, political party, or even an idea, and basically to serve everyone except for us, ourselves. To varying degrees, everyone has a sense of duty, responsibility, necessity, and guilt, and they're ready to serve a group or organization in one way or another. A club, a family, a school, company, political party, the state, and so on. Then he says that all the structures emerge from this and develop when a separate group of people begin to think and act in the same way. Then they're joined by other people, the structure grows, and it forces members to follow the rules and eventually amasses the potential to get control over huge groups of society. On the material level, it consists of a group of people who are working with common goals and material objects, buildings, furniture, yada, yada. But on an energetic level, a structure appears when a group of people think and act in the same way, a result of which the parameters of their thought energy are identical.
So this boils down to just about everything that you have found super important in your life and these groups that you belong to that maybe you do out of necessity. So, and to varying degrees, you feel like you fit in and it's great, but it also polarizes the shit out of you. So, like politics, you could be a staunch Republican or a hardcore liberal, and you can find yourself acting in ridiculous ways. Like sometimes you're like, I don't even know I did that. And it's because you're under control of these destructive pendulums. It doesn't matter which political party you belong to. All you're doing is literally, if I'm swinging a pendulum, you're pushing one end and then the other party's pushing it the other way. You're just pushing it back and forth. So it's doing is just creating more energy and
Yep.
harvesting it from each individual. So you're giving it to this collective thought form, which isn't really giving it back to anybody.
No, it's stealing it from everyone who is participating in it, whether they're for or against it. And that's one of the big critical things, right? Is like if you're for it or if you oppose it, you're still delivering energy to whatever that thought form is. And
Yeah,
on
but
us,
fighting it is the worst
it's the worst thing
possible
you
thing
can
you could
do.
do
Yeah,
because it's
exactly.
actually just giving it more of you and more of your attention, more of your time, more of your energy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where it's crazy. And that's where it's like so easy to get lost because people want to fight, for this cause or that cause. And then they wind up getting pimped, by this collective thought form, this pendulum. And there are other synonyms too. We could use egregore. Cheney in the chat says servitor. These are all, like sort of more magical entities that have been talked about in a lot of literature. And he does acknowledge those in this chapter, but he says that those, so like all egregores would be pendulums, all servitors would be pendulums, but all pendulums not necessarily servitors or egregores, right? Like it's so much further beyond that. Each of these streams or collections. And what they're doing is they're seeking more conflict, more energy. It doesn't matter how they get energy. They just want energy. And so with the pendulum swinging back and forth, one of the things he talks about is that they're always seeking to escalate conflict. And in any particular situation or scenario, that conflict is to be escalated as high as possible. And in doing so, there are these scripts that happen. And this is when we're talking about choosing and declining. This is a big thing. So like, think about getting cut off in traffic. Like we're talking about like just two regular people. Some dude gets cut off on traffic. He gets upset. His temper gets high. He bumps the person in front of him. They pull off the side of the road. They get into a huge fist fight. It escalates to the point of, it could be murder. You know what I'm saying? On the side of the highway, dude blacks out, doesn't even know he did it. But there's a whole script that is followed because of that initial conflict. So these whole scripts can play out. We're not even aware that we're necessarily doing it or a part of it. Like that's what he's talking about when he's talking about scripts.
Because even somebody mugging you would be a pendulum. It's almost anything you can think of, a scenario that basically takes you off your script or out of whatever you're doing at the moment and captures your attention. It could be the phone ringing while you're trying to do something. So all of these ideas, like he even goes as far to say tools and stuff are pendulums, because anything that becomes like a fad, like a TikTok trend that everybody's buying, it's a pendulum.
100%. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, and there's a lot going on in the chat too, and I want to address all the stuff. So just keep in mind the script thing, because I want to come back to that. But this is a good question here, because like at the very beginning of the chapter, like the heading is "Rent Yourself Out," so we can talk a little bit about this, explaining like the renting of yourself out. Just like I said a little while ago, he says that before you can learn how to choose, you have to learn how to decline. So when that initial pendulum prod hits that person, let's say, cuts you off in traffic, instead of doing that next, that next action to escalate the conflict, instead of doing that, you decline to engage in that script and you rent yourself out, meaning you acknowledge what just happened, but you don't give emotional investment or energy into it. Maybe you can talk a little about renting yourself out, Abbie.
I kind of see this also like a good scenario would be, working a shit job that you hate, but it's not forever. So you can go to this job and make yourself miserable the entire time you work it. But if I'm renting myself out, that's me like realizing I can react to every little, customer that comes in, or my boss being a dick because he's allowed to. Sorry, I probably shouldn't say words like that. But I can do.
Why not?
No, I don't know.
That's how you talk.
Are we trying to keep it PG?
I don't think so. No,
Okay.
not for my
Well,
channel.
good. Then I'm just gonna keep it real.
Yeah, keep it real.
So if you're dealing with stuff at a job that you hate and people that you hate, you can react emotionally to it all the time, but that's feeding a pendulum. You're feeding all your energy into it, and it's just going to get worse, because the one thing that these pendulums do is make sure like they harvest the number one emotion it harvests is fear and anxiety and worry. So negative emotions, and it can positive emotions as well, but the negative emotions are the big ones. And so to rent yourself out like in a job that you're not liking, this isn't your goal, this isn't your door, this isn't your pendulum. There is a pendulum for you. There is a job and a goal and a door for you. But in the meantime, I'm going to rent myself out, which means I don't have to be provoked. My boss can be a dick, but I can actually there's methods to defeating a pendulum, and a couple of them are like just choosing to ignore it, or you can acknowledge it and pretend like okay, and then do whatever you're going to do anyway. Or you can actually like send them positive energy and try to think about what they need. Like maybe they're just having a bad day or something's going on in his personal life, so I'm gonna like just send them a little bit of positive energy, and you can change the whole entire scenario. So then you're not being controlled by this pendulum, but you're running yourself out because it's not really, I don't know, that's my
You're not,
interpretation sort
yeah,
of it.
you're not like invested. You're not like emotionally invested in whatever it is that's going on in that moment, right? Like
Yeah.
you're here, you're observing it, and I don't think he talks about the inner guardian until like the 4th chapter, but like basically the idea is that you want to observe what's going on. And so to decline to choose is to basically to kind of like detach from the situation, right? Instead of
Yeah.
being reactive, you can step back. And then once you have balance, because he says like when these pendulums come, they knock you off balance. So let's say like the universe is conspiring to help you and you're like going in this direction, and then all of a sudden you get a phone call. Oh, this thing happened. That knocks you off into a wobble that's in a different vibration even.
Yeah, because he says that each pendulum has its own vibrational frequency.
Uh-huh.
So it's trying to get you into that frequency instead of the one that you're on.
Yep. Yep. So if you, instead of taking the initial prod from that that thing that's going to happen, that the pendulum's conspiring against you, the universe is conspiring for you, the pendulums are conspiring against you, and they're going to try to knock you off your center, your balance, your equilibrium, right? Like if you're going to do a thing, and I can give examples or stories for these too, but like then it knocks you off and tries to get you off balance so that you express distaste or dissatisfaction instead of just remaining focused and staying on that frequency that was established already, so that you don't continue to just simply move forward. So instead of, because you would subconsciously choose, if you're not aware, to just follow that initial pendulum prod. As soon as it hits you, you go into that vibrational frequency. But instead, what you need to do is decline to choose, rent yourself out, take a step and just like relax, and then you can begin the process of choosing, which is like, how am I going to respond to this instead of reacting to it.
Yeah. Well, and Cheney said, but if you above banana instead of up, so as above, so below, the outcome is open. And that's kind of the idea. One of the ways to defeat a pendulum is literally to kind of make it a joke. He said, the thing about Antarctica, like if you're in a bad situation, imagine you're in Antarctica and everyone there is a penguin, and then you all of a sudden are like, as above, so banana in a way. You're making a joke of it, you're making light of it, and you've actually, um, instead of polarizing yourself one way or another to resonate with that pendulum swing, that frequency, you're stopping it. It won't take your energy anymore. It's gonna actually leave you alone. It might still take everybody else's energy, but you're good.
Yep. That's the thing. It's like those pendulums are going to get energy, whether they come from you or not, whether the energy comes from you or not, it doesn't matter. So instead of trying to fight it and try to stop it from happening, what is the better alternative to that? Like you could get all rah rah and like make a sign and start walking around your neighborhood.
Protesting.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah. I think it's so funny. Like, what would aliens think about protesting? It's just like, oh, you're gonna walk around and chant stuff? Oh, okay, that's neat. It's not gonna do anything. Like the pendulum doesn't stop because of that. It only stops whenever it basically becomes ignored or old hat, right? Like the things that he talks about that are no, that used to be pendulums would be like old stone tools, or he uses the example of records, which it's kind of funny because like we collect those now as like collect antique.
Nostalgia collectibles, yeah.
But stuff like that, things that don't have any real value or use anymore, they're old. There's not anything.
But at one time, I mean, the mass desire and need for it to have the thing. And even because money is energetic too. So if you're spending money, you're spending your time, you're spending your thought energy, your labor, whatever. So in the same right, even charities are pendulums. Because you're like, oh, it's good, I'm doing good for the world, but really it's like maybe somewhere. But a lot of the times you're just playing the benefactor, and maybe it's not something that you even resonate with. So if it's not something that's really true and dear to your heart, then it's a destructive pendulum to you.
It's a no. Yeah. If it's not giving you any energy back, right? Like that's one of the things to kind of measure it, right? Like, are you getting from this at least as much as you're putting into it? Because if you're not, then the balance is uneven. So it might be time to renegotiate, so to speak, and maybe step back away from those particular those pendulums, those streams or currents of energy, right? Like if it's, I mean, hey, I mean, if you're the top of BLM and you just bought 6 mansions, then hey, it's a fucking good pendulum for you. You know what I mean? Like, congratulations, you fucking,
Yeah.
you played the game well. But but if it's something that is becoming obsessive and taking a lot of your energy or hurting relationships that are important to you, etc., then you might need to take a step back and decide whether it's something you want to continue to contribute and be involved in or not. Because it can be anything, like all these things. The idea is to keep your individuality. That's really what transurfing is all about. It's like to be your complete, true self. And in order to do that, if you have a lot of influencing factors pulling you in different directions and making you conform to them, because the pendulum rule is do as I do, right? Like you have to conform to me, be as I am. And if you do that, then you lose your individuality. It's gone. You lose your expression as a true person. So what you want to be able to do is to love your heart, right? Like with and be your true authentic expression. And then what he says is that the pendulums will then have no choice but to light you up at that point. That's a little bit I guess I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves, maybe a little bit, but
That's what we're trying to do with the Secret Society of Good Guys. Sorry, I had to plug them.
yeah. Plug it up, dude. 100%.
We're growing our own pendulum.
Well, if you're conscious about it, that's one thing, right? Like, because most people aren't, right? Like, but you
Yeah.
can look at any of these structures. I walk, I live in a college town. I walk through the university all the time, and I look at all these beautiful, architectural marvels, these big columns, all this great, Western architecture and these huge institutional buildings. And I'm like, damn, this place could really, it could really do a lot of good. This institution could be amazing, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know what they're teaching in there anymore, but I mean, but it is not Aristotle. You know what I'm saying? It ain't fucking what it could be in there.
The
So it's kind
Socratic
of
method.
but yeah, pendulums, they don't have to be bad, but they can all potentially be destructive, right? And what that means is that once it begins to take your life force and your energy into it, and you begin to conform to it and become like it and think, because you're thinking at the same frequency as that structure, as that pendulum, now you're doing its bidding, right? Like it wasn't one dude's idea to just jump up one day and put on a white t-shirt or like a white button-up short sleeve shirt and a placard and a tie and like only ride around on bikes and knock on people's doors. You know what I'm saying? But everyone who is part of that particular organization, they're all unified in mind. They're all vibrating at the same frequency. And literally, it's so trippy when you step away and observe it. Because like it seems like on the surface, oh yeah, well, those are just Mormons. It's like, how are all these people
Yeah.
thinking the same fucking way? Like,
And if it's not your pendulum, it's so easy to see. You're like, oh my gosh, these people are nuts. Like they're in a cult. Because you could think that with anything. With a religion, with, bodybuilding even. Like it's all, each one of these little things is somewhat cultish. And when you're not a part of it, you do see it. You're like, oh my gosh, what are these people doing? Why are they, why do they act like that? Like, but
yeah,
it's just,
it's their script, right?
yeah.
Like, so it's their script. And so scripts are like the law of hypnotic rhythm. These are things that have been established over and over and over so many times that they're now cliche, right? It's It's like how a fight starts. You see it over and over and over again, right? A million times. And you're like, oh, well, this is going to happen. And then this is going to happen. That is a pendulum escalating its conflict in a script. And there's so many different ones, you know, it can be, yeah, there's just a myriad of examples, and it can be, really almost anything, but that's the law of hypnotic rhythm, and it's expecting that reaction from you, right? Like
A
it's
reaction instead of an action, because
yeah.
that's most of us are just reacting to most of these situations. So, even the one that really struck, he talks about guilt and everything, and it goes deeper into it later in the book, but you manipulate people through their emotions. So fear is the number one. And what does the media do? It's not there to actually inform you of anything. It's there to polarize you and get you swinging in this vibration of fear. And then you're suddenly addicted to it. Like, you have to keep watching the news. You have to keep seeing what's happening. You got to keep checking that news story and seeing, are we going to war? What's happening? And you're so emotionally invested in it. You are being loosed. It's all being, that energy is going somewhere. And I don't know what my point was, so I'm gonna go ahead and let you talk for a minute.
So it says CK here. What's up? CK is asking, are there techniques in the book that describes on how to handle pendulums? And yes, there absolutely are. That's a big part of it. A huge part of the book is just really, it's about just awareness, ultimately, being able to identify a pendulum. I'll tell a quick little story, just because this happened to me the other day, and I caught it, and I don't always catch it. And especially over the past, I don't know, I would say a few months before I read the book again, before I did the summary again, because I was forgetting. And that's another thing too. I just want to encourage people, if you're trying this stuff out and it doesn't work the first time you did, or I won't say that, like, if you're trying this stuff out and you're not seeing immediate miracles in your reality, don't trip, because you gotta work with this stuff. And you'll get better and better at it. It's like the more I read this book, I've said this before, it's like the less spiritual it is. But I was driving on my way to a comedy show that I was producing and hosting, and I had been working with this guy to do some stuff. And basically he sent me a text as I'm on my way to this comedy show. So, I've got to think about the headliner and the production and the lights and all this stuff. I've got all this stuff on my mind. And then, of course, here comes a message that's like a creative conflict. It's like hey, I'm going to do this, and this is how it's going to be kind of message. And I was like, oh, is that right? Right. Like, my ego immediately flares up, I'm like, oh, that's how it's going to be, huh? And then, I was like, oh shit, this is it. This is a pendulum, because how that can happen, right? Like, of course it's going to happen to you when you're like enmeshed in something else. Like, you're focused on something. It's important. You need to have good energy, right? You don't want to come into your comedy show with bad energy, all angry because you just had a bad phone call with somebody about a creative disagreement or something. And you're like, welcome to the show, blah, 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 and you're all angry and shit. And like, it could ruin the whole night. But that's what the pendulum wants. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wants all your energy, and it will take it in any way that it can. So instead of being like, I didn't even respond. Instead of even responding to that, I was just like, okay, this can wait. Like, I can respond to this literally any other time, and I will table it. And we wound up having a great conversation, ironing everything out. A lot of that's probably just my own, just my own sort of importance, really. It's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. That's how it's going to be, huh? It's like that immediate ego flare. And instead of, getting into an altercation and a fight and an argument about something that was literally nothing I could do about in that moment anyway, and then ruining probably potentially a relationship, not to mention my night, I decided, hey, I will just not react to this. I see it as the pendulum prod for what it is, and I will just decline. I declined, and then we picked it back up. Everything was fine. Had a good conversation. There was no bad blood. There was no animosity, and And yeah, so that's just an example of like what the script could be. The script could be what the script wants, what the pendulum wants is for me to react in that moment, argue, to get more conflict, to get more energy, to create, friction, because it's always looking to escalate that tension, always, always, always. And it would have sucked all my energy out if it could have, you know what I'm saying? So, and it will. So
And
that's
so one of the biggest concepts in the book is or in this chapter is to ignore it and not to avoid it, because avoidance is like, if you wall yourself in, are you really defeating a pendulum?
right. It's not about putting your head in the sand like an ostrich and just pretending like it doesn't exist. But you have to learn how to acknowledge it without investing in it emotionally. That's what I think renting yourself out really means, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like it's like you see the thing on the news and I can't help it. Like when I go to the gym, I look up for a second and it's like, war. I'm like, which one? But that's like, it's saying the things. It's like, oh, this thing and oh, that thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. Even today,
Yeah.
it's like the
Now
Texas
I watch
thing.
Oh, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, now when I watch the news, I'm like, oh, what are we play acting today? Because it's all just fake. You just get to that point, you're like, okay, I can watch it, I could take it in, but now I'm not avoiding it. I just ignore it because I see it as all silly.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy because I have done it myself time and time again where I would just be like getting into a tizzy over some shit from the internet or like watching some video or news thing about this thing that's happening here, there, or yon. And then I open up my blinds and look out the window and literally it's just birds chirping, people walking their dogs. You know what I mean? Like that's all that's really happening. Today it was the Texas border thing. My mom called me. She was like, "What about this Texas?" And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. It doesn't affect me. I don't live in Texas. I'm not going to give my energy to it. Of course, I do care. I want good outcomes for people. I want people to be okay. But it's like, what is me taking a side in my driveway and getting exasperated about this thing that I literally have zero control over going to do to help anybody in this situation?
Absolutely. I heard people talking about it today too, and I'm going, "Ooh, listen to that pendulum. These people are getting swept up in it already." And yeah, it's not about not caring. It's just that you don't have to give it any level of importance, especially if it's not directly affecting your life.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And Cheney here. The pen is mightier than the sword, but the penguin is mightier than the pendulum.
It is so much mightier.
And what's funny about that is he even says in this chapter, like if you're in a stressful situation and people are all up in arms and stressed out, imagine them all as penguins. He fucking says that, does he not?
Yeah, I just
It's
said that
crazy.
earlier though.
It's crazy. It's just
You
crazy
must not
though.
have heard me.
No, I mean, it's just okay. I didn't know that she did.
That's okay, but yeah, no, it's true. Imagine everybody's penguins, or just something ridiculous. It's adding humor where everyone else is taking it serious, and you don't have to like outwardly express the humor, but if you can find it's detachment,
It is.
point blank, and detaching yourself means you're no longer harvestable.
Yep. You're no longer fodder. You're no longer pendulum fodder. I mean, and that's kind of like what being awake is in some ways. I don't know. Everybody kind of has a different perspective of that, I would think. Some people view that in many different ways. It's such a strange phrase. But, as far maybe mindfulness, is aware of these energies sucks, these energetic informational structures that are constantly vying and they're competing for attention, right? Like they want to have the most attention each. So they're competing against each other in the stream. And so in order to really defeat the pendulum, it's really the whole point is to create your own thing, instead of being a part of something else. He says the pendulum rule is do as I do. But the transurfing rule is to allow yourself to be exactly as you are and allow everyone else to be exactly as they are.
Yeah.
Easier
You
said
don't
than
have to
done.
think exactly like me. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And we can get along.
We can get along and disagree at the same time.
Absolutely.
Unreal. Wow.
So that's like, I go back into like some of the biggest pendulums I've been caught up in are politics, absolutely. But another one was religion, just church. A church is, how much energy will it take from you? Not just going to Sunday service, which is a big deal because, like, for me, Sundays is all about getting ready for Monday. It's my last day to like do laundry and get ready for the week, and then you have the church service, and then the potlucks that you have to prepare food for, and I'm not saying these are bad things, but it is a way for you to constantly be dishing out your energy. But the one that really got me is that I was so deeply invested in end times philosophy and, reading like the Book of Rapture and all of that, and or not the Book of Revelation about the Rapture. It was a Rapture
Mhm.
Ready website. I used to follow all these websites daily and what was happening in the world that was possibly fitting into this end times philosophy. And I wanted so bad to be a part of the group that everybody's posting in the forums, and it's definitely it's funny when you look at it. It's like you aren't good enough yet to be a part of the group. You're in the group, but nobody responds to your messages, but this is all like, it's all looshing you. It's all taking your energy. There's better ways to spend it, and I mean, the great way that that one really hooks you is fear. You're constantly in a state of fear, like, "Oh, the end is coming. What if my family's not saved? They're all gonna go to hell." And it's like, I don't know, when you start to really think about these things and you free yourself from it, and you start to see it as a pendulum, you're like, "How much of my energy did I waste on that?" Whether it's coming or not, it is what it is, right? Do I have
Yeah.
to sit and harp on it and think about it every single moment of every day of my life? Because all it's doing is making me sick. It's taking all my thought energy. It's literally everything that I think about.
Yeah. Yeah. The biggest hooks, definitely fear. And then he talks about guilt, duty, and obligation. And those are the things that goad us into submission into these energetic structures, these organizations, because you're not being a good church member if you don't bring a potluck, or whatever, fill in the blank, you didn't go to
If
the,
you don't want to go and lay hands on somebody with everybody else or pray in tongues or
yeah,
lurch on the floor.
exactly. 100%. Yeah. It makes you a bad member. And so, yeah, from a very, let's say, ancestral um, need for us, we have to survive. So, I mean, modern society's kind of new. So I think like the fear of what can happen in the wilderness, in the wild, is something that is very profound as a fear, and that um, keeps us compliant to whatever the pendulum demands to do as it says that we should, because of the fear of being outcast or hurt or being a bad member, kicked out of a group, all that kind of stuff, judged, all of that. And what's ironic about it is once you step out of the pendulum rule, then people start to admire you for doing that. They're like, they feel,
They can, but you might actually just lose a lot of people too, and that's okay.
you can, yeah,
It's hard at first, but it's also, I mean, that's how you find your right people.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, he talks about that, and how in teenagers, it's the one teenager that has their own sort of flair or style, is the trendsetter, and then all the other teenagers kind of key off of them and start to copy them. It's like the firefly analogy in Tufty. It's like the one who has um the willingness, the courage, the boldness to be themselves and not be apologetic about it, is generally speaking looked up to and admired and often followed as a result of just being themselves, right? But everyone has that same power to just be themselves. It's just that as human beings, we're so innately used to following that script in the pendulum that we'll do that when it's another person, or like another thing. We don't even recognize that it's a pendulum.
Because even celebrities are pendulums, and that's I've used this analogy before, but it's really powerful. And um, well, so for example, if I look just generic and like everybody else, or if I want to be famous and I want to make myself look exactly like Ariana Grande, I will never be famous. A pendulum is not going to like lift me up and elevate me to the top of a pyramid, because I'm actually copying and duplicating somebody else. So it it's not going to vibe with me. The way that you make a pendulum work for you is to be your own frequency, and so to embrace whatever it is. And usually it's your little flaw that sets you apart. The one thing that, like when it comes to being beautiful, there's the people who are like perfectly sculpted beautiful because the Kim Kardashians of the world. But then we have people like Patricia Arquette, who has like a crooked tooth, but her crooked tooth is so stinking cute. And without it, I don't think she'd be as beautiful. Or Jennifer Grey from Dirty Dancing. She had the big nose, and then, but it was such a distinctive thing that she was lifted to the top of the pyramid, and then she gets a nose job and nobody even knows who she is. She lost her fame. It's so funny, but it's your distinctive qualities that actually elevate you and keep you at the top of your own pendulum.
Yeah, when you conform and follow the do as I do rule, then you become a parody. And that's you top out as a parody, right? Like you'll never be anything more than a carbon copy as a parody. You won't get lit up
You're
or
lighting that person up. So if I'm a great Michael Jackson impersonator, I will always just be a great Michael Jackson impersonator. Nobody's ever going to know who I am.
exactly 100%. So in order to really, you know, do as you to be as you are, you have to step away from the pendulums. And it's not necessarily about celebrity, right? Like everybody has a different goal too. I mean, it's an easy example to use. So I know everyone might not want to be like famous or on TV or a comedian or something, but to your point about the flaw, that's really powerful too, because in comedy as well as beauty, charm, the flaw is really exposing that and showcasing the flaw is really what makes performers great. That's what makes an amazing comedian. Like that's what makes Rodney Dangerfield so good, right? Like
His
and
weird eyes and
he's flawed. He's super
yeah,
flawed. And
absolutely.
what really makes him great too is that he doesn't know it. He has a blind spot to that flaw. So he's got a flaw and he's like, I don't get no respect. And we're like, yeah, well, I wonder why, buddy. You know what I'm saying? Like we know, but his character doesn't know. So, but like those flaws, you can know, he obviously knows about it, but like when he's performing, he doesn't acknowledge it. And that's what makes it funny. But, like a charm and attractiveness, it comes from unity of heart and mind. It comes from authenticity and being, being able to demonstrate and display and be comfortable with yourself, including those flaws. Those flaws can be features, he says later in the book.
Yes, they can. It could be your distinguishing feature. And yeah, I mean, it's your key to success, and it's not just physical. It is in all ways, your little quirks are they can be exploited in the opposite direction. They can actually be what I always tell my kids, actually, is that your weird is your superpower. So, because they'll call me weird, they'll say, Mom, you're so weird. So I look at them and go, thank you, because my weird is my superpower. That's what I do that nobody else does. And so that's kind of a philosophy I've tried to instill in them. And even as a teacher, I would do that with them too. Because kids always, do the group think like, oh my gosh, this person's so weird. I'm like, They're weird as their superpower. That's something that they do way better than anybody else. So,
And I mean, imagine from a young age being encouraged to lean into that, whatever it is. That's what makes phenoms, like people who are incredibly gifted and talented at certain things, like Jim Carrey, who, was in his bathroom making faces at himself from like age 5 until now, probably still doing it, and so those are the things that we need to learn to embrace. And it's never too late to embrace those things either, because you can always forward to the past, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. But yeah, I mean, really, when it comes down to it, like what's crazy, the pendulum thing, it will fuck with your head because you're like, oh my God, they're everywhere. And you're like looking around at them, like kind of scared, like I don't want to get looped into a pendulum. But the paradox of it is that it's really not about giving your attention or energy to the pendulum that you need to be watching out for so much as just giving that attention and energy to yourself, just giving it to you, focusing on yourself. And then the pendulums kind of more fade into the backdrop, but being able to notice and see how nature works and how these scripts are unfolding around us, being able to see that. I was listening to a Rumi meditation last night, and I'm going to screw this quote up too, but it was like, you don't see the waves, you see the foam. And that's like how we see, reality, right? Like we don't see the pendulum, we don't see the energy, we see the expression of it, but we don't see it itself, but once you start to see it as a phenomenon, he even talks about like when you're driving down the road or walking down the sidewalk and someone is going very slowly in front of you and you try to pass them and then they just like go to one side,
I'm that bitchy person behind them every time.
But it's not them. They don't know that they're doing
I
it.
know.
They're subconsciously doing it because it's the pendulum. It's wanting your energy. It's wanting your attention, and it's trying to escalate the conflict.
So when you have to laugh at yourself, like I get sucked into them in the mornings, like because I'm always running kind of late. So on the days I'm running late, it's like, okay, there's a car driving really slow in front of me. There's a dog stopped in the middle of the road. So now I have to stop my car and honk my horn until it moves. And then I'll get to by the time I get to the train and the train has me stopped, then I'm finally realized, oh, okay, this is a pendulum. So then I just sit and laugh because that is another way to break a pendulum, is just to laugh about it. So I sit there and laugh and make fun of myself, and then all of a sudden, the road's clear and I get there on time. But miraculously.
Yeah, the 3 ways to deal with a pendulum. One is to step aside and let it pass, basically, not ignore.
Don't give it your attention.
But yeah, just like basically just let it fall to the side. Act in an unexpected manner is the second one. So like doing something that's completely like off the script, right? Like so unexpected that it just doesn't register, something random, right?
Oh, I got a good story on that one.
Oh, good. And then the third one is making a joke about it. So please tell that story. I want to hear about that.
So I had this kid come up to me, and I knew I don't want to say he was a bad kid, but he was a little shithead. And he came up to me and he's like, Daniel, which is my son, he's like, Daniel said a bad word today. And I go, yeah, what did he say? He's like, he said bastard. And I go, oh. I look at Daniel and I go, are you fucking kidding me? The little kid looks at me and goes, and he just walked away because he didn't know what to say. Right? But it was the most epic moment ever. I mean, they were teenagers, but still, it was not the response he expected. And I just was like, I'm not playing this little kid's game. Watch me, And I don't know. It was one of my finer moments. I was really proud of myself.
Hell yeah. No,
for cussing at a kid, but
that's
it was
beautiful.
great.
I love it. Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of makes you think about game theory too, right? Like, the only way to win is not to play the game or just to play a different game, right? Like just don't engage in that prompt that is like, hey, here's the initial prod. And you're like, I see you. I see what you are. And then you can do something completely random and unexpected, madcap like that, you can also just let it fall through, he says, try to just let it pass through. Or you can do, what he calls the vaudeville lifeline and just make a joke about it, which is something that I like to do a lot. That's how my family is. And I've said this a few times, and I think it's very true. Anything that you can make a joke about does not have power over you. You're making a joke about it. You know what I'm saying? So that really dispels that energy of heaviness and feeling helpless.
Those intense negative feelings. Yeah. The laughter is one of the most powerful weapons that you have in your arsenal.
I love it. 100%.
Illuminati.
It's
Shout out to Paranoid American, who also did my backdrop.
That's dope. Yeah, that's really cool. Hell yeah, Thomas, Paranoid American. Yeah, you guys are killing it on the good guys. But yeah, I mean, that's a beginning. It's a beginning to Pendulums. Is there anything we should mention here too that we haven't that you can think of?
I don't know. I feel like we did pretty good, but
It's a pretty and crazy topic, like how do you even approach this as an idea with someone who just a regular person? Like, I mean, we're
it
all
seems
regular
so
people.
spiritual to me in the beginning. I'm like, what energetic structures that take your energy, but you see it in like a football stadium or any sports stadium, and that. I think that's where it really resonated with me. Is I'm like, I've always found it weird when grown ass men take off their shirts and paint their big fat bellies and do all this weird shit and wear the freaking hair, and they're like, what are they even thinking? Like they are fanatics, literally. And but I mean, I bet you each one of those men in their regular life would never do anything like that. Just only sitting in those football stands that day.
That's what's so funny about it. It's like you see like the Canadians are like the nicest people. They're out there setting cars on fire because, the Maple Leafs lost, like it's like, holy shit, what is going on? You guys don't even
A
care.
sports team lost, you don't even play on the team. Or I because I watch it with like my husband and all these other, men who watch sports religiously, they will have a bad day if their team loses. And it's like, dude, first of all, you're not on the team. Second of all, you never played on the team. Third of all, you don't even live in that state. Like, why are you like having a bad day over your team losing? Like that is a total loosh. And so just applying these ideas to my own life, I'm like, oh, there is something to this. Because it's really weird how people do this.
It is.
Sorry, CK.
I hope you're in the Grimerica area of Canada, wherever they live. I'm so American. I don't even know Canadian geography. That's kind of sad. And it is a real team. There really is a hockey team called the Maple Leafs. Yeah, Toronto. Cool. Oh, I got a buddy who's in Toronto. I don't know if that's you, probably not, but my buddy Jay. Where the Maple Leafs are. Yeah. I know where Toronto is. I'm not that ignorant. But close. I'm close. But yeah, man, I love this book. It gets better and better. And this idea, it really is like the linchpin of the book. Like it's one of the ideas that was completely new to me when I started reading the book. And it made so much sense. When I started reading that first paragraph of this chapter, I was like, yes, 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 yes. I've seen this. I know you're right about this. It's not something that you can materially touch or measure in that way, but I can see it in my life every day,
Because really what it all boils down to is that you can't have your own personal power if you're constantly giving your personal power away to things that aren't even important. It might not even really be that important to you. You're just looking to identify with something or someone.
right?
So, you will never come into your own power and your own greatest potential if you're constantly giving your personal power away. And if you're doing it unconsciously, unconsciously, like giving it to politics because you're getting so upset over Trump versus Biden, then you will, that's a lot of your own personal energy that you could be harnessing in a much more constructive way for you.
Yeah.
Because really, what are you doing? What are you doing by getting upset about it? Are you changing anything? I mean, vote. By all means, go do that. Exercise your personal power. But my point is, by you getting so wrapped up in the debate over who's better, you're doing nothing of quality for your own life.
100%. And that energy would be so much more constructively used to create something different and new. That's really it, right? Like if we treated the established order and these old things that we don't like, that we apparently are against or whatever, like the stone tools of old, and just walked away and said, yeah, we're just going to do something different, then it all just disintegrates. That's the way to win. You don't play this game. You walk away and create your own, and that could be creating your own pendulum too. If you're intentionally doing it and you know that you're doing it, and then now you can keep your personal power, and it can help you to move things forward. But you walk away from these old contraptions, constructions, institutions, whatever, and then create something different. That's the only way to win. It's not to fight against the established order or whatever. Like that's a waste of time, to go out with a sign and picket or whatever,
You change the world by changing yourself.
I mean, I used to hate that. Well, I used to hate that so much because that's so cliche, but it's very true. And just even, and we'll talk more about this as we go through the series, but I've seen, and I've made a lot of mistakes. Like that's why I know this stuff so well too, is because I've fucked up a lot. But I understand a lot of what he's talking about after 8 years of practicing, and seeing the changes in yourself, because your observer doesn't change, but your mannequin does, and people start treating you differently, and the way that the world and everything starts interacting in a completely different way. And that's trippy as hell, because you're like, I'm intentionally changing myself and it's working, and I'm scared, kind of, because it's like, holy shit, this does work. It's like you're becoming a completely different version.
It is scary. Yeah, watching myself do it with bodybuilding, it's like, oh my gosh, like half the time I'm so in awe and I love it, and then other times I'm like, oh my gosh, this is scary. But
because you have to
yourself to new limits.
Well, yeah, because if you're going to create that version of yourself in this material reality, then you have to kiss goodbye all the other versions.
Yeah.
So you literally have to commit to one, and just be like, that's what a decision is. That's what choosing is. To decide means to cut away. So you cut away the other options. And that's really the first thing, is like declining. Okay, look, I'm going to not just be sucked into whatever pendulum thing or group or whatever homogenous, bullshit container that the world, because the world will push you in and it'll define you for you, and it'll do all those things if you don't do it yourself. But first we have to learn to decline, and then we can begin to choose. So once we start choosing, it is trippy as hell, because you're like, I am literally changing. I'm becoming a different person. Like not in like my observer isn't changing, but I am becoming like a specific version of me, and I can see it on tape because I'm doing comedy and shit. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's like, I'm not okay. that's crazy. And it takes a while, things don't just happen overnight, but it's cool to watch. You can actually watch and see that feedback loop. And I think that just creates exponential growth too.
Yes, it does.
All right. I think we covered it pretty well. I don't know. Hopefully it makes sense.
Well, it makes sense to you and me, so I guess that's the important part.
Well, re-emphasizing.
Good job, Owen. I think you killed it.
You killed it, Abbie.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll read a couple of these summary lines, and maybe that'll put a pin in it for us tonight. He says
the
a pin,
pendulum.
a pin in the pendulum. Yes. It's created by the energy of a group of people thinking in the same way. That was one word that we didn't say, is like pendulums, what they gain adherence is what he talks about.
The
And
adherence to a pendulum.
you adhere, you conform, you adhere, and think it like glue, like the glue factory. Someone wrote an article on that one time, and it was like fucking so good. And that made so much sense. It's sticky, you stick to it. And that's the energetic and vibrational frequency that kind of like brings you to that place. A battle, the pendulums are battling for adherence. They're competing. They want you to become a hardcore fundamentalist, but then they want you to change and go all the way to the other side and, turn your hair whatever color or something, right? Like it wants you to pick this one, and then this one wants you to become part of it now, it wants you to become a Canadians fan instead of a Maple Leafs fan, or, an Auburn Tiger instead of a Bulldog, which will never happen in this house. I'll tell you what, I do have my pendulum affiliations as well.
It's OU. Oklahoma is all about OU versus OSU, and everybody's like, "Are you OU or are you OSU?" It's like, neither. I'm Oklahoma.
Boomer Sooner. That's what I thought you were, an Oklahoma fan. An Okie.
Well, by proxy, I'm not gonna actually say
enough.
I give a shit because I don't.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. I get it. And that's another thing too, is like, I think once you understand this, you can have fun in the game and kind of play in the game. It's like, but I don't get all bent out of shape. Like my dad will literally, bless his heart, I love my dad, great guy. He will get so upset. He'll be upset for like 2 or 3 days, like emotionally, like he's been loosed, you know what I'm saying, by the game if they lose.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's part of that. That's part of the investment. And like, if you invest in it and then there's a win, then you get energy back. So, it's positive and negative, but when it's a game and you can kind of play it, it's a little bit more fun because you can be the observer. It plays on human emotions, catching individuals in their web. And if there's something that you really do not want, it will come into your life, he says. We were talking about
you
fear.
get what you do not want.
You always get what you don't want, right? And the reason why is because you're focused on it and literally bringing it into your own reality. You're manifesting it. You manifested that, man. But we'll talk more about that later. Because that is another thing that really separates this book, because people talk about woo-woo manifestation a lot, the law of attraction and all of that. But they don't talk about the converse side of it, the sort of negative part, that you always get what you don't want, and you don't always get what you do want, because we'll get into that.
Yeah.
To free yourself from a pendulum means to give it no place in your life. To give it no place does not mean to try and avoid it. It means to just ignore it. To bring a pendulum to rest, you have to change the established game script, and the energy of a stilled pendulum becomes available to you. So once you step aside, or you act in a unexpected manner, or you make a joke, now you get the energy. It doesn't go to the pendulum anymore.
Personal power.
100%. He says that there's simple solutions to complex problems. Solve a problem, rent yourself out. Hopefully we made rent yourself out relatively clear. It's about acknowledging but not investing, right? Like declining, taking a step back, not being
Don't get emotional about it.
Yeah. Don't be reactive. Just allow what happened to happen and say, okay, how will I consciously respond to this, as opposed to reacting? But and that takes a lot of practice. I mean, that's not something that just I'll start doing that now,
If you do it 1 out of 10 times, you're ahead of most people.
You're a fucking badass is what you are. You know what I'm saying? It's when that weird text or that weird thing happens to you in traffic or whatever. And then, sorry, I gotta sneeze. I'm not gonna.
No one's been caught by the man called pendulum.
Yeah, I've been pushing it a little bit hard. My body just wants me to get some rest. It's all good. but yeah, you get in that situation and all right. Yeah, you learn to remember over time, and that's part of that law of hypnotic rhythm. Once you become once you establish that law of hypnotic rhythm as something that you're not going to just immediately react to, right? You decline, you acknowledge it, and now you have the opportunity to choose by waiting. Oh, and that was something that you mentioned too, the positive visualization thing. It will gently bring the swing of a human pendulum to rest. So he's talking about frailing in this chapter, even 10 chapters before, where he's talking about, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to sneeze, but it keeps getting tickled in there.
That's too bad. Sneezing is the best.
Oh God, I know. I want to so bad because it feels so good. Literally everyone will just they'll be like, I got to get off the stream. It's so loud.
Yeah, it's giving just positive thought energy. Like you literally think about, well, what's this person missing? What do they need? And it doesn't you don't even have to know the answer, but if you kind of have a general idea and you just imagine them getting it really quick, it's weird how you can like stop that pendulum from swinging right at you.
Yeah, that's
You can defect.
yeah, that's a really cool and interesting thing. Just thinking about the thing that the other person might want, right? Like what would fulfill them or make them happy. If that's like your boss and they love golfing, you can just visualize them hitting a hole in one or whatever, being home chilling in a hammock in a sunny afternoon or something, especially if it's something that they like, then that would endear them to you more based on this theory. This is not something I have tried out as much as I should, but
Same. I'm gonna start doing it.
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
do it
wish
more.
good thoughts on people.
Yeah. I'm gonna be like, you're in an orgy. No. No, but to solve a problem, rent yourself out. To avoid getting stuck in what he calls a suspended state, find your own pendulums.
Oh,
You want to
because
touch
he
on
does
it?
talk about at one point that there is like if you sit and try to avoid every pendulum, you will go into a suspended state where nothing's happening. And you're like, what the fuck's going on in my life? I'm not doing anything, nothing's happening. Like, you don't really have any goals. So you don't want to stay in a suspended state, but you want to choose which pendulums you're going to interact with and the level of interaction. You don't want to give it everything most of the time.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's when if you are like, oh my God, everything's a pendulum, and then you just withdraw from everything, then all of a sudden you will feel kind of empty and have sort of a
Hollow.
yeah, 100%. But to the point of defeating a pendulum and getting your energy back, when I first read this book, I was smoking cigarettes, and I remember when I quit, it was in large part due to this book. Maybe entirely, but I remember when I quit, I couldn't believe how much more of my thoughts that I kept because the thought of just, hey, smoke a cigarette, smoke a cigarette, smoke a cigarette. That thought alone was cleared from my mind, which freed up a ton of just mental energy in my own mind. And I noticed that straight away.
Or how much else you're able to just get done.
Right.
You don't realize how much time. Yeah, because it's all time is energy too. It's all relative.
Yeah, well, even when I was smoking, I was thinking about, and then I'd come back in, get started on something, and then immediately in the middle of it, smoke a cigarette, and I'd be like, no, I can't smoke yet. I got to finish this up. Smoke a cigarette, and how many times I thought that, just time and time and time again. It's
Yeah.
insane. But yeah, the suspended state and not having a goal, it's nothing to worry about. Sometimes it's a good thing to not have a goal. If you don't feel like you have a goal to choose yet, that's okay. Again, highly recommend reading the book. There's still plenty of time to read along with us. We're just doing a chapter a week, so you can get caught up real quick. I also have a summary. I need to be plugging that. It's only $15. I've been seeing people selling their ebooks and audiobooks for $50 and shit. That's insane. I'm trying to get this information out there because I really feel like this is it. This is the stuff that can really help you. My heart went out so much to like people who are probably in a similar situation to what I was when I first started learning about the world and all these establishment shit and politics and stuff and conspiracies, where I just felt so helpless. But to me, this book is the way, so I want to make these ideas available to people. If you want to get a good quick synopsis of it, it's available all over the place. My website, bootsygreenwood.com. It's on Audible and stuff too. Most links should be available. And like, come hang out with us in the Telegram chat and the Facebook group as well. I'm doing some readings and stuff in there from time to time. There's some good engagement and stuff in there and other people who are awesome to meet. So come and check those things out. Check out the Secret Society of Good Guys
on Friday nights on Project Cheney YouTube. And then you can also find me on most social media platforms at Abstract One.
Perfect. That's awesome. And we will be back next week. We'll talk about the Wave of Fortune, which is pretty cool. Also known as the
this chapter.
Blue Bird of Happiness. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I like it too. I like it a lot. It's awesome.
It's the good news side of the pendulum.
It is. It is the good news for sure. And there's lots of it. There's lots of good news. The pendulum thing it's intimidating at first, but
you got to clean up the mess so that way you can embrace your personal power. So we start with pendulums.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's how it works. I mean, even the church does that, right? They're like, let me tell you the bad news first, and then we're going to tell you the good news. All right, I'm putting the Telegram link in the chat right now. And
well, thank you all for coming to hang out.
Thanks everybody so very much for coming to hang out. You guys are amazing. I'm going to get recouped. I'm going to chug some NyQuil and be revved
you need some
up.
Vitamin C and vitamin D too.
I did a lot of vitamins today. I was doing all the vitamins, dude. Hell yeah. Vitamin C, vitamin D, multivitamins, gummy vitamins. Yeah. Viagra. No, I took vitamin V, no, but I took a bunch of stuff, and I feel pretty good. I mean, I think I'm
Cheney,
just tired.
you're ornery. She's yeah, that. Does my mic work okay?
Can you guys hear me okay? All right. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks so much for hanging out. Much love. We'll see y'all on Friday night hanging out. Secret Society, good guys. Peace out, everybody.